Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Pisgah Podcast.
Coming to you live from the front porch of Mountain Crossing Mercantile at the top of 181. We are your hosts. I'm Drew, that's Mangler, and you are listening to Pisgah.
As always, I'm a few minutes behind, but you didn't get my text message because there's no cell phone service.
Let's get this one going. This week's news and past week updates. The bullet points I have here is we finally got some rain.
Yeah, we did. Some areas actually didn't get rain. Some areas got a decent amount of rain. So, kind of funny to see.
Yeah, not necessarily wet dirt, but hero dirt and lots of humidity. One thing that's cool is that this weekend the World Cup downhill season starts in Leogang, Austria, and we have a good handful of locals and regionals that are repping. Got Chris Grice in junior men, and then, of course, Nico Mullally, Lucas Shaw, Dakota Norton.
Yeah, so we've got some people to cheer for.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it because last year we missed out on a bunch of racing, and I think that with the teams being properly cautious, we missed a lot of the people that could have and maybe should have been at some of those races.
Yeah, I'm also excited to see, Chris Grice get on the track. He's had some great runs here lately, especially some of his Windrock runs. Of course, always like to see Nico shred and Luca repping Hendo, even though he's Pisgah Forest now. But and then Dak's not on our side of the mountain, but we're still going to pull for him.
Yeah, we got regional favorites as well as locals. So and pretty much anybody that's either repping the USA or even just at the front of the race and is somebody you're a fan of.
Oh, absolutely. And some big news happened over this past week. The new Middle Black reroute was quietly opened somewhat, and you and I got a chance to go out and have a little out in black taste on it. So let's get down to it. What were your thoughts, Drew?
All right, my thoughts are, no, it doesn't replace what was there, but I don't hate it. It probably will take a couple years, but I think the typical Pisgah roots and rocks are going to probably start to present themselves again, and it's going to start feeling like home again at that point. And at that point, we're going to have that honest conversation with ourselves again about, do we have enough people helping to maintain this versus the amount of people that are using it? And, time will tell.
Yeah, time will tell. So you and I rode it on Sunday evening, and then I rode it again on Monday afternoon with Tommy Penick. He and I climbed it, then he dropped back down it, and then I continued on to a classic Middle Black loop just to climb the new, descend the old, just to do that lap, so to speak, like a welcome to farewell lap. So climbing it was a little wetter that time. And so some of the rocky sections presented some good challenges, classic Pisgah, slippery rocks. It's definitely a tight trail compared to what some have experienced in the past with some of the newer built and rerouted trails. So, go into it with an open mind. It's the best way I can say. Like you said, it's not going to replace what was there, but there's a reason why we are replacing what was there. So, I encourage everyone to go out and, get a taste of it. It climbs well, and it points downhill, so it's a fun bike ride either way.
Yeah, for certain. And what's there, it's just dirt. It can be moved. Things can be fixed and amended and changed. I, for one, I hope that hard left switchback gets some love or some work, and maybe some of its bumps worked out, because I'm not a huge fan of that particular section. But you know what? I'm not crying about it, because I know that it's going to get ridden in, and if it doesn't, we can go out there with some shovels on a trail day and fix it.
Yeah, we can always make it work. We can re-sculpt it. So, Drew, just like Middle Black, we've had another pretty popular trail that's had a long history in the other Pisgah that's getting some rework love and a little reroute on its exit, and that's the Yancey Ridge Trail. So this week I got up with Paul Stahlschmidt of the Northwest North Carolina Mountain Bike Alliance to get a little interview about what's going on with the Yancey's Ridge Trail, and also just to get kind of filled in on this whole new Mortimer Trails project that they've got going on up there. You know, some new trails and lots of stuff going on.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to hearing this one. Thanks for doing this.
Oh yeah, always looking for an excuse to drive up to the high country. Well, sweet, Paul. Thanks for meeting up with me this week. We're psyched to have you on the show. You've been a mover and a shaker kind of behind the scenes there for a minute. So kind of give me a little introduction on what you do professionally and then what your involvement is with bike trails.
Sure. Well, thank you. I'm psyched to be here and talk to you a little bit about what we have going on in our neck of the woods. I work professionally for Appalachian State here. We have a lot of bike and trail people doing this. I have a couple different hats here. I work as a advisor and a professional orienteer for new students and for students here that are freshmen and sophomores at our school. I also work in recreation management as an adjunct, so teach a couple classes with a lot of others that are mountain bikers and trail people in the area. So we have a lot of collegiality here in the bike world. My interest in trails is in some ways separate, but there's a lot of overlap with things we prepare students to do. And I've been really lucky to kind of have some overlap with these things I do as a volunteer, and showing these examples to students and bringing examples of relationships with other movers and shakers that really matter, like land managers, nonprofit world, stuff like that. So
kind of connecting the dots.
Exactly.
Yeah. When we were talking about doing this interview, you sent me some documents to kind of look over and check out. And one of the things that you sent me was like a timetable of events of how things have happened. And kind of the first date on your list was 2014. And that was kind of when you started building the relationship with the U.S. Forest Service. So talk to me a little bit how you got that ball rolling and what brought you to doing that.
Yeah, well, and I didn't include some things that actually happened before that, which some of those were with locals here in Boone. We had back in Boone Area Cyclists was founded in 2009 or somewhere around there. Work we did with Rocky Knob Park, got a lot of people interested in trails and getting Sawyer certified and getting training and doing some professional or some highly skilled volunteer work with Rocky Knob Park. And a lot of these folks ride in Pisgah, and we started to see that there was a big need to deal with the trails we have here. And there's a long history of riding back in the early days of riding in Wilson Creek, and there's a lot of locals around here who have been around a long time riding those trails. And I think the consensus was that it's not a secret anymore, and we're starting to see some changes with how the trails function, and we may need to do some planning and some long-term care for these, or we're not going to really have them around much the way we know them. So, 2014 was when we started meeting with the Forest Service and kind of planning to adopt trails, but we did like the trail strategy that I know Lisa Jennings of the Forest Service mentioned in the podcast you did on Old Fort. That was kind of a big high-level effort that National Forests in North Carolina did along Nantahala and Pisgah, and some of those documents like that, or that document in particular, kind of guides other actions, and we saw the need to kind of form a bigger advocacy group. So we basically started a Sorba chapter, very similar to Pisgah Sorba, just that covered this region. Our geographic center is in Lenoir, and the name of this organization is the Northwest North Carolina Mountain Bike Alliance, which is kind of a sub-chapter of Sorba. And in Western North Carolina, you've got Nantahala, Pisgah area Sorba, and then you've kind of got us moving up the chain. And we had all this big bubble here with national forest land, like 52,000 acres or something like that, with a decent amount of mountain bike trails, but we didn't really have any high-level agreements or planning taking place. So that was really where it all started. And We signed an agreement with the Forest Service just shortly after there, like 2015, which is called a Volunteer Service Agreement. Pisgah area Sorba has one of these, and we actually copied theirs. And
Exchange some words.
Yeah, and I can remember specifically the district ranger coming back saying, there's one little thing in here that they do that I would suggest doing, and it was basically it was a part of the agreement that allowed us to hire professionals and for us to actually, kind of have the ability to exchange funds and get grants and spend their money even, so to speak, through a certain type of agreement called a cost share. So we went ahead and added that, and it's been really productive, as you referenced in the timeline I shared with you. So lots been going on.
It's funny you mentioned, like, a lot of people have been riding this area for a long time. And a lot of the old schoolers that I've met throughout, not my real long time of mountain biking, have always referenced, like, the Boone era and, like, the early days of riding mountain bikes, like Shoals Mill Road, Globe Road, stuff like that. And it's kind of interesting that seems to be, like, where a lot of people start mountain biking, but then the Brevard area gets, like, all the credit, kind of.
Mm-hmm. And one of the issues there, the big issue, I would say, is that, and I don't have the numbers here, but, it's something like 40% of the trails in that area are bike legal.
Yeah.
And here you've got an equal number of trails in terms of miles, same kind of, the district size is about the same. But the percentage of actual designated mountain bike trails here is something like, it was like 10%, but that's changing, and we'll get into that. But there's reasons that's changing, and that's a big deal, because even back in that trail strategy, I would say another big thing is the Pisgah Nantahala National Forest planning effort. That people have read about, commented online, and seen all these things. And for us, our biggest thing was there is not enough, and we compare numbers somewhat to what's going on in the Pisgah Ranger District, where there's 40% of the trails are accessible, and that's super out of balance for us. So I think that's part of the reason. It's also very rural. I mean, the access, here to trails, and we're talking about places called Mortimer and Edgemont and Globe. Like those require a lot of navigability, even just getting there, which is 20 miles of gravel roads for most people, at least, to get there. So I think the experience is similar in terms of that national forest riding, that kind of self-sufficient tech long rides in the backcountry where you don't see a lot of people. I think that's very similar. The old Fort Zone as well.
Yeah.
But it's just a little more rural here and a little less miles. And we're trying to change, not necessarily to bring a lot more people here, but we're trying to just kind of upgrade a few things that are degrading in terms of sustainability issues and that kind of stuff, because more people are riding here. And as I know folks out that way can attest, the more people that are riding, the quicker things degrade if they're not in good shape.
Oh, absolutely.
So we're trying to stay ahead of that. That's probably one of the biggest things that motivate people around here, is just trying to fortify things to handle more traffic.
Yeah. Well, it's like if you look at a trail such as here in this district, like Schoolhouse. Like if Schoolhouse, which is not in the best shape right now, if Schoolhouse got the amount of traffic that Lower Black did, where do you think it would be at as far as, like, trail status right now?
I think it'd be shut down completely. and that's one of the things we're also, I don't want to say it's a race, because it's not really a race in that regard here, but some of the trails we're working on have been on the decommission radar of the Forest Service. And I think Schoolhouse was the most complained about trail in the 2013 Pisgah trail strategy that we talked about. Looking back at those documents, I think that's pretty justified on there, that everybody's commenting about, do something about Schoolhouse. Well, look at what year it is now, right? So things take time. And another thing is, a lot of people, some of these old schoolers, I'll include myself in some of that, but we like some of these things the way they are. We like them a little on the sketch side. We like them a little bit on the tech side because you can't find places to ride that kind of terrain in some regards. So
They don't build that stuff
right
anymore because it's not in like a build style strategy.
Right. Well, there's a lot of things that contributed to getting to where it is environmentally, and really, Schoolhouse just is the perfect example. There's everybody's probably nodding their heads right now because it is an example of what it's past the point of no return. and that it's rideable for trials riders. It's rideable, and it wasn't that long ago that it was rideable by anybody that had some technical ability. Not that long ago. So, but at this point, it's very, very difficult to make a clean pass on the whole last mile of trail. And a lot of people, I would say, that might be complaining about some of the work, that might make things a little bit easier in the name of environmental sustainability. How often are you riding Schoolhouse these days? That's my question. So because that's kind of where some of these trails are headed, like Yancey Ridge, one of our favorites for sure. And, if it's past the point of no return, it's not going to be that great of an experience for most people riding.
I think it was like maybe 2015 or 2016. I linked up with Moto Mike and Sap and Ethan and some of the boys, and we went out and did like a full sweep on Schoolhouse. We trimmed some shrubberies, and then we got in there to the ditched out zones and like kind of dug it out a little bit and tried to make it a little more rideable. And I want to say like 3 months later, after like 2 big rains, it was back to being a ditch where your pedals would dig in on the sides at that point.
Yeah. But it was awesome while it lasted, right?
It was. That next full run I did on it, I was like, oh, this is amazing.
Oh yeah. And there's some of the locals around here. We made a big effort one day, not that long ago, and just kind of shaved back the bank a little bit where you could transition onto one side and just clean it and get out of those little ditch zones. And I remember doing that faster than I ever had for like a month, but it wasn't, the next rainstorm just changed everything. And, we actually, Schoolhouse is an interesting one because we do want to keep as much of the kind of feel of that traditional trail. And that's really a guiding kind of principle to some of the stuff we're doing is just people go to the forest for longer backcountry rides. That's a given. People go there for, certain experiences that you can't get everywhere else. And we're trying through planning to keep that. And, even when professional help is being brought in to do trail work, we want them to know that it's, that's kind of guiding. We want to keep the tech wherever we can, as long as the trail functions, as long as it's kind of a sustainable build, then let's keep it as rugged and as traditional as we can.
Oh, absolutely. And I think you guys are pretty blessed to have a great trail builder here locally that grew up in the area. And, it's Michael Thomas, Moto Mike. And, if it's like we have Shrimper down in the Ranger District and you guys have Mike up here. So it's a good combo to have him working on some of the projects.
For sure. And it becomes a passion project for those folks as well. They're connected to a lot of the people that ride it, and they know what they like. And I think they're dedicated to see it through and to make everyone happy.
Let's step back. You mentioned something earlier about, navigating to places like Mortimer, Edgemont, et cetera. I think that's kind of one thing that maybe scares some people off because we jokingly say, like, in the Ranger District, when you cross the gates of Pisgah there on Highway 276, like, you lose cell phone service. But you're right there at, like, the front range of trails. Like, everything's there. But here, you lose cell phone service, like, 45 minutes before you get to, like, the trailhead parking or something.
There's no reliable signal unless you're up on the high on the ridge lines. There's not really. And there's no signage that's consistent. Usually it's a good idea to have somebody guide you around, and there's technology has really helped people who might be a little
adventuresome.
Yeah. Just being able to follow the blue dot on a map somewhere, in some way, as a safety net that people are comfortable with, or reading trail reviews or videos or whatever. So I think times have changed along with just word of mouth. It's still rugged terrain though, and you better be prepared.
Yeah.
You're still not, anywhere close to, just like in some areas of the Pisgah district, you're not super close to emergency care. So this isn't like riding a local bike park where you can get out easily if you have trouble. I mean, being able to do emergency repairs on your bike, all these, all these things, and most people listen to the show probably do also. It's kind of what goes with the territory in Pisgah if you're not with a guide or with somebody who can take care of you. But yeah, there is an effort to look at the infrastructure. Also, Wilson Creek area in particular, it's in drainages and it's in areas where there's not a lot of flat land. And unlike Old Fort, which has a huge area being planned as a kind of major trailhead, and then in Brevard, the Davidson River area where there's like key access for everybody. And it's not really the same over here. So we're really looking at like how the infrastructure is going to be able to handle a little bit of increased traffic as we improve trails. And the idea is just that if it's dispersed, it's a little better, Brevard, if you're, accessing trails from, 1206 or, Mills River, and, some people might be coming up from Davidson and you end up kind of overlapping somewhere up in the forest. It's kind of the same thing here. It's just that our trailheads are going to be smaller. But we are trying, and if the scoping documents for the NEPA process for the Mortimer Trails project kind of talked a little bit about how some areas are going to be getting a little bit more attention to parking.
Yeah, because the pandemic kind of changed everything. It brought a lot of people a little deeper into the forest than what they would usually do because they kind of had more time on their hands.
Yeah. And
so whereas Pisgah Ranger District, we're close to a lot of major metropolitan areas, but in some ways, the Grandfather District in Wilson Creek area is closer to some other major metropolitan areas. So
yeah, and we get traffic in this area from the Winston-Salem, Charlotte area, the Piedmont, and also people coming from the west side, especially hitting the 181 trails, which are a little more accessible than some of the stuff in the Wilson Creek on the Mortimer Edgemont side.
Let's talk about Yancey Ridge. That's kind of one of the main reasons I came here to talk with you. Based on what map you look at, it appears to be a system trail. It doesn't appear to be a system trail. Like, what is its official status right now?
It's a legal trail. It ends on private property. And because of that, I think I'm okay saying some of this stuff, but I think if you would call the district office, they would say the same thing. I mean, it was basically removed administratively from some maps back in the day, and it wasn't until we started doing planning for it that we kind of uncovered some of these things about the history of the trail. And that's one of the nice things that mountain bike advocacy brings to the table is getting answers. And, kind of once you start working and having communications with the land manager, you figure stuff out, and you figure out not just answers on what statuses are, but, what you can do to make it better. And that's kind of really how this whole Yancey thing started. It's very important. We had a meeting in Banner Elk to talk about the Mortimer Trails project with some of these old school folks we've been talking about. They're really important voices to hear. I feel like it was January in 2018 to kind of kick off some of this stuff. And out of that meeting, Schoolhouse and Yancey were probably the top priority trails.
Okay.
With Yancey kind of being in that gray area of not being on maps and, perhaps the most visited trail in the Grandfather District and not being on maps, we really, really focused on that. And Nicholas Larson, the district ranger, really wanted to focus on Mortimer and this first kind of project because, Yancey is over one ridge from Mortimer, so we really kind of focused on Schoolhouse and some of the trails around the Mortimer area first. But Yancey has always been a priority trail, and we, through a challenge cost share agreement with the Forest Service, I don't want to get into too many technical terms or acronyms of Forest Service speak, but really it kind of became on the front burner. And we were able, the advocacy organization, the Alliance, was able to, work with a local contractor, Mike Kamas and TerraTech, and basically hire him ourselves because we had that agreement and we won the Santa Cruz grant, which is super psyched. That we were all super psyched about that. So we were able to bring, kind of move that project forward and manage that. Some of the other trails are linked to RTP grants, and some of them are going to be going through the Forest Service contracting process, and bids and all that stuff will be a little bit different. The challenge cost share agreements and stuff like that Pisgah area Sorba has, those kind of things going on where they have a volunteer service. I don't know that they're doing cost shares, but they're definitely doing they've won RTP grants for all these trails that they've worked on, Trace Ridge, Avery. All those are products of them winning $100,000 grants.
Yeah.
And them, because they have that agreement with the Pisgah district, they're able to do that. So we're kind of doing the same thing. We've copied a lot of stuff that they've been doing over the years, and this Mortimer project is kind of our first big one. Grandfather Ranger District is managing that first grant that was won, and it was an RTP grant from 2018 that they applied
for the other stuff in Mortimer,
Yeah.
not the Yancey Ridge Trail one.
Yes, exactly. Okay. Yeah. And we've also got, they also applied for a grant for a trail called Marks Mountain, which is in the plan as a brand new trail that'll be off of Yancey. Essentially, it's going to provide a loop opportunity of brand new single track.
Yeah.
So that's 2020, 2023, that'll be executed. And our chapter of Sorba, we're kind of in some ways still in our infancy. So we don't have this huge budget where we can afford to pay large sums of money. We're getting there, but that's part of the reason we have such a great relationship with the National Forest, and the level of trust is kind of there that we can work together and contribute volunteer hours to match grants, and we can both be fiscal agents on different grants that we might apply for. And we've kind of become pretty good at this, and we're even involve other partners. We've got other partners that are having conversations with us about mutual interests in watershed protection and sustainability, and so much so that we're even getting benefit to upgraded trails from grants that they apply for.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Because I noticed on one of the maps, I believe it's the Pisgah Map Company map of the Grandfather District, Yancey Ridge kind of acts as a border of just regular national forest and then a wild and scenic river area. Is that right?
Well, Wilson Creek is on the east side of the ridge, and it is a congressionally designated wild and scenic river. Those areas can have mountain biking, unlike some congressional designations like wilderness study area. Those are wilderness areas, of course, don't allow mountain biking. But in wild and scenic, you can have some trails, and I think the other side that you mentioned is the wilderness study area, but that particular area around Yancey Ridge is also a congressionally designated roadless area. So there's some pretty impressive land. It's a really unique area and really high quality experience. There's some old growth forest around. It's just a really amazing place to ride bikes.
So let's step back a little bit and talk about kind of the history of Yancey Ridge Trail, because I've kind of heard you referred to as Paul Yancey Ridge.
Paul Yancey Ridge?
Yeah. You are Yancey Ridge.
Well, who's told you that? Because there's a lot of other people that I've pretty much been living there, I think, just trying to, manage this grant that was won and, keep in touch with the trail builder. It's a super remote area. So Upper Black, it's to go and to kind of just have a little oversight on what's going on and check in with the trail builder, see if there's any needs that volunteers can do. And that's another thing. It's definitely not my trail, but it's I would say that it's it's a trail that we're all really proud of and we all want to see done right. But we spend a lot of time there, and volunteers have been going up as part of this project. It wasn't like a turnkey job, so not to get into technical terms of trail building speak and contracting, but volunteers are contributing greatly to the project with corridor work, sawyer work, in some cases a little bit of finish work. A lot of the planning, of course, some of the trail design was donated by volunteers. It's a trail that a lot of people have a big stake in, and a lot of people have spent a lot of time up there.
Talk to me about your first experience that you can remember being out on Yancey Ridge Trail.
I'm going to really date myself here.
No, that's what I want. We want to hear like.
Yeah, I mean, I was a student here as well, and have some other folks that were around here with me riding bikes in the same area that are still around. But it was definitely early 90s. My first experience was riding short Yancey, probably, which was the first time I ever rode up there. But, later that year and other years rode kind of the long Yancey version. But the first experience that I remember was probably just a small camping trip I had with a friend in college, and I do remember parking in the Roseboro area and having a late night kind of run-in with some motos that were cruising around our tent, and that was kind of a wake-up call to Wilson Creek for sure. I remember just being blown away by the scenery of that Mountains to Sea section along Greg Prong, and just going down Yancey and seeing the bear sanctuary signs and the massive trees and just really just being out in the middle of nowhere. I mean, those are the things that kind of jump out at me, and I think if people that are listening that have ridden up there, you're probably resonating with some of that because it's very similar today.
Yeah, I mean, it's deep out there. So for those listeners that aren't familiar with Yancey, there's you ride Yancey like kind of, I guess you can kind of do it one of three ways. You've got, your long Yancey, which Yancey's kind of divided up into two sections with like a forest road coming off the middle point. Mm-hmm. What is that? Forest Road 451?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. But so when you say short Yancey, did you do upper or lower?
Upper. And that road 451 is Marks Mountain Road, is also the same, another road that people call that Marks Mountain Road. I think that's on some of the Forest Service maps as Marks Mountain Road too. Back then, that trail was kind of cool. It was there was a big logging project in the late 90s, I think, that really crushed that road and turned it into a proper road. And right now it's still, I think, kind of gated, and I'm not sure, but pretty sure that road is open seasonally. Right now there's a couple landslides on it that are keeping it closed. But usually that road is open seasonally for hunting and other access. But that was actually a pretty cool trail back then. So you would ride Upper Yancey and ride that. And you talked about the Long Yancey Loop. That's 13 miles, and the single track the trail portion of that is really only about 5 miles.
Yeah.
But that includes the climb up the Mountains of Sea Trail, the Old House Gap, which is, or I should say that doesn't include that, which is a few miles, and that's an open road for high clearance vehicles, but it's a pretty nice experience. It's a long climb on a pretty road.
It is really pretty back in there. I've never done short Yancey. I've always done long Yancey for whatever reason. I think well,
the effort that it takes to get there, you probably would want more miles, but I think the short Yancey is a good introduction. I want to say it's probably 7, maybe 6 mile loop if you take a right there, and the upper portion has just been redone. I mean, that's a good story in itself. The upper portion of Yancey, which is about a mile, we've done a road to trail conversion on that. The contractor has, and that was kind of the plan, to take a 15-foot wide corridor that's bermed up from mechanized equipment when the road was built. There's this berm that's like 3 feet high that developed on the outside, so it was holding water like crazy. We really tried to narrow the corridor, make it more of a trail experience, and that's going to be a designated trail section now from what's 4062 Orchard at the top down a little less than a mile at that point will be a designated trail now and not a road. So that's a pretty cool thing.
You could tell it was an old forest road, but it had got kind of trailed in a little bit just with like overgrowth and stuff. But but it was built with a dozer. I mean, it was wide. Yeah.
And there was some vegetation on that, and it was because of that berming on the outside, any section that was downhill was holding water.
Yeah.
So it got really channelized, and I think a lot of people will be happy with the way that it turned out. TerraTech did a good job using as much of the rock that was on the inside of the trail to try to get traffic on this like off-camber slabs and out of some of the outside of the trail that was just dirt after it was kind of filled in a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So that's pretty cool. And in cases where the trail was, kind of a mellow section of a bench cut that was 15 foot wide, built by a dozer, he actually cut into the outslope there and kind of benched that off. So, there's actually a proper bench in the road, which eventually is going to wear like a trail.
Yeah.
So
Because half that quote trail as it was you just kind of navigating back and forth across the ditch.
Mm-hmm. Right. And that's changed a lot.
Yeah.
In that it's now it's like a mile long luge run. I mean, it's really across rocks.
Yeah.
So it's different than just slamming down. I mean, I think some people have complained about taking tech away, and I mean, I'm not sure I agree with chundery rocks. I mean, mountain bikes can roll over that stuff just fine.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, maybe navigating a little bit tougher line with a slab or, something that, might be a little more challenging is a little more techy.
I agree.
So, I felt the biggest challenge with the way it was keeping fist-sized rocks off of my down tube and my shins. So riding through it was no big deal, but there were other things that could happen that weren't so great.
Yeah, getting into those, I think I've heard it called toaster tech.
Yeah.
Rocks the size of toasters, you're just like blasting through. Future-wise right now for Yancey Ridge, I've seen some photos that Mike has posted of where he's been getting his machine to and at.
Right.
Pretty impressed.
Yeah.
So it's like progress is being made pretty good on that.
Really moving. I think he would be able to tell you exactly how many drains he built. There was 4 miles of maintenance across the trail where most of that trail didn't change at all. There were 3 small reloads done from the start of Long Yancey to this final section that's getting rerouted off of private property. And those 3 reloads are pretty nice because they take you single track basically, take you off of kind of an up, small little knob that might be unsustainable, and we flagged around those. But for the most part, it was just drains and outsloping and doing stuff that mechanized machines can do that really help the long-term sustainability of the trail. So there's not a lot of character changes with that portion, but this final section is the good stuff, as Mike would say. I think we've been calling it the Promised Land. One of our volunteers kind of named it that because it is classic cove forest where there's high canopy trees and massive trunks of trees, and the trail's kind of winding through that zone.
Oh, that sounds beautiful.
It is an amazing forest, and we've tried to, through the design, Christian Jackson and I spent an afternoon up there like really looking at initial design, doing some flagging. It ended up being where this trail is going, and we were just blown away. We wanted people to have that experience of dropping into Yancey the way you used to, but at the same time, this particular area of the forest is really, really amazing. So it's a little more pedally and might have a little bit of uphill in there that's, just kind of flattish, but eventually you're going to drop and it's going to be downhill the rest of the way. Almost all of the trail is downhill from that point, but that upper zone is really special. And that's actually where you might have been seeing some of the photos, is up in that area. Brand new single track trail. The last mile of trail, which will probably end up being closer to 1.5 miles, will be brand new trail.
Well, talk to me about its prior status of, it ended on private property. Like, we mentioned about Schoolhouse being all ditched out, like that exit prior off of Yancey was more than ditched out. You had like 4-foot drops in there and stuff like.
Well, that's interesting too, because that back in the day, that trail also dumped out on private property. There was a big land purchase that the state owns now, and that's also been something we've been navigating. Is the state of North Carolina. There's a long history of Wilson Creek of advocacy, Foothills Conservancy, other land trusts doing work, great work, to ultimately turn big parcels of land that are private over to state of North Carolina or over to the U.S. Forest Service. So that's super exciting because Wilson Creek is a watershed that is very, very important, and it's very high priority for a lot of people. But Schoolhouse, one of the reasons that exit got so bad is that for a long time that was ending on private property too. So, but now that's owned by the state, the very last part, and we have permission to redo that one. But with Yancey, it just needs to be on federal property wherever it can. I don't think that's unique to national forests across the country, that there might be some kind of sketchy places where you're grandfathered into an old trail that's been there for a long time. So in some cases, that trail's been there before the forests existed. And, in our case, before the Weeks Act, in North Carolina, we've had trails around here. Yancey Ridge there's been people using that trail for years. I mean, since like the 30s or 20s or something like that.
Probably the Indians used it.
It's possible. So yeah, there's a lot of history with that, but it's going to go down to Edgemont Road. The trail will be relocated down to Edgemont Road onto federal property, and there will be. It's up a good ways from where it ends now, but not that far, probably about maybe a quarter mile, maybe a half mile up the road.
Yeah, because like where it dumps out now or prior, I remember like as you would pedal back up the road, it was kind of cliffed out on your uphill side and then creeks on the other side, and then it kind of flattened out a little bit. So I'm guessing that's probably where you're going to have like the new
there's one spot. there's out of the whole place, there's one spot and people familiar with that are there's a couple dispersed camping sites along the creek there on Rockhouse Creek, and there's a few boulders, and there's a draw that kind of comes in on the right side there as you're going up the hill, and it's kind of tight, but that's where it's going to come in, and it was the best we could work with. And overall, the design is really trying to control speed and trying to control that final push to where you're not kind of coming into a gravel road, worrying about traffic and other trail users and all that stuff. It'll be a popular hiking trail. People will want to be up there because it'll be a special place. Yeah. So there will be a little more traffic on this than normal, but still in a pretty rural area.
Let's talk about, you sent me a map with a bunch of new trails. Is that stuff you can talk about?
Yes, for sure.
Okay. A few minutes ago, you mentioned this new Marks Mountain Trail.
Yeah.
That is going to kind of split in between Marks Mountain Road and that Old House Gap Road. And it's a new trail, brand new trail, that looks like it's going to create either, a new climbing opportunity to get up to the upper section of Yancey, or, just a new different route to ride for a descent.
Yeah, it's going to be built as a way to climb up, or as a way to use Old House Gap and then come back down that.
Or out and back.
Or an out back. I mean, the parking area where that comes in on Roseboro Road will be a good spot to park for any little circuit you do on those trails.
Would that be a new parking spot?
There's a few campsites there, and there's room for more.
Okay.
It's already there. Most people that come from a high country park at Roseboro Road in Roseboro, I think people who ride Yancey from other points, a lot of times come up Brown Mountain Beach Road and Edgemont area and park there. But this place will be kind of right in the middle, and the Marks Mountain Trail itself, and the reason that the grant was won, really, it scored higher in the RTP process because it'll be an alternate to the Mountains to Sea Trail. So Mountains to Sea Trail, one of the only bike legal Mountains to Sea segments, is that section that's on Old House Gap Road, the one that we talked about that climbs up to Old House Gap. But it's an open road, even though it's sometimes gated, or it's let's just say it's a high clearance vehicle road. It's not gated yet. but there is some work being planned on there that might be gated temporarily. It's a nice road, but the Mountains of Sea really,
They want to keep it trail.
they want to keep it trail. So if there's an opportunity to have a trail off of an open road, it's a good option. So
Yeah.
there's also some talk about maybe extending the Mountains to Sea, the hike portion from the bottom of Marks Mountain down to Greg Prong Falls, and potentially it would be an option for hikers hiking the Mountains of Sea through Wilson Creek to just bypass Roseboro and just go straight up. And the scenery and the forest on the Marks Mountain zone is like crazy cool. It is really. I mentioned earlier that it's a roadless area. Parts of it are in the roadless area. Huge trees, nice views. It's really unique open forest. So some people are really going to like that trail, and it'll offer a different experience. So Yancey does have some tech and is not for everybody. Even with the new work, some of the section are being maintained and kept as hard, technical, rocky trails. So people could ride Upper Yancey potentially and Marks Mountain and have another option.
Yeah, it looks like Marks Mountain is going to intersect with Yancey in that old clear cut zone. Is that about right?
Yeah, it's right near Old House Gap.
Okay.
And I think the map doesn't quite show Old House Gap, but it's right near there.
Okay.
So it's pretty much, it is connecting to that 4062, which is a gated road, but it's just for a small section.
Yeah. And then some of the other new trails that you have on the map is some stuff around the Mortimer Campground area. You have a new trail that looks like it's an alternate to Thorpe's Creek, which I think I climbed up Thorpe's Creek after doing squash a couple of years ago with Ethan. And
a lot of people have stories about Thorpe's Creek, but usually it's just one. Yeah, Thorpe's Creek has a watershed issue. It's a priority for the forest. It's trout habitat. The trail crosses the streams I don't know how many times, and
a dozen plus.
Yeah, and honestly, I just want to say we can do better than that. I mean, the trail will be kept to the beautiful falls out of the campground, Thorpe's Creek Falls, but the section that nobody rides. There's also a lot of hemlock damage in there. So
yeah.
It's been crazy to try to keep that trail open, even though it's on the map as a bike trail. It's not used at all. So
I have no reason to ride it again. I'd rather go up the road.
So, the we can do better part is going to be High Knob. And there's part of that is on an existing kind of old road that starts up near where Wilson Ridge comes in. And then the last half of that is all single. The last half of that's going to be single track coming into the Mortimer Campground, right behind the CCC Center.
Nice. It seems like that Mortimer Campground has been getting a lot more attention over the past couple of years.
Yes, and partly it's because of natural disasters. There's big rains we had a couple of years ago, lots of blowouts in the Wilson Creek area, and part of the big damage is caused because we've got man-made things going on with culverts and structures that are built in wrong places. And when you start to channel water and you have a natural event, it blows out. And, this Estes Mill Trail that is being worked on right now, that's actually going to be a pretty new trail. It's an old area. And, I don't want to get people psyched on logging roads as trails, but in some cases there are a few places where they're on proper alignment, and if you can do what we did like on Upper Yancey with design and with high level trail building, narrow the corridor and convert that to a trail, it's a good opportunity to kind of use an area that's already on the landscape and make it better. And in the case of Estes Mill, there's been like 14 culverts that are pulled as part of this process. And, we've got a really strong partnership going on with Trout Unlimited, who has really kind of bought into what mountain bikers want in terms of good trails that also aren't really impacting natural systems. So they've been a great partner with some of the work on Yancey and some of this work on the Old House Gap Road, which is about to take place now. And then also with this Estes Mill project, which is a feeder streams to Estes Mill Creek, which is a nice watershed that starts Wilson Creek. There's a lot of restoration work is the word that we use a lot going on, and that's where some of the funding comes from. And the Forest Service end of things, it's coming from restoration dollars that are government dollars that are helping with high priority watersheds.
Yeah, and then you've got also off of this Estes Mill section, you've got Jackson Knob, which looks to be a new trail connecting, looks like Brown Mountain Beach Road up to Wilson Ridge Trail.
Yes.
So that'll create like some good loop opportunities to, how I look at this map that you sent me showing, some new stuff coming into Mortimer in that zone. It kind of opens up that area for more multi-day use.
Yeah, more use, but also linking together more legal rides too.
Yeah.
And a lot of these zones, like these trails were on the map. Some of them were on the map and people riding them. They're just, we can't do any work on a trail if it's not an official trail.
Exactly.
So now we can actually we had a great kind of weekend just a few weeks ago. Shout out to those folks that came and camped out in Mortimer. We worked on Jackson Knob, and we're able to legally actually do that because it's had NEPA on it, and we're doing some work on it to kind of prepare it for the professional work that'll come later. But there's just a few places where we could make a lot better, a lot more fun to ride now, even though it might not actually get some work for a couple years or a year. But that Jackson Knob Trail, Wilson Ridge, if anybody's ever ridden along Wilson Ridge up there, that comes, off of 21 Jump Schoolhouse area, crosses the ridge. There's a large section of private property up there too. Trail that's on the map that crosses private property, and this trail, Jackson Knob, will allow you to bypass that and get back up to Wilson Ridge, where it's on federal land. And you part of this, I was thinking about this as you were describing it, but going back to some of the established goals of the trail strategy in 2013, and also meetings we've had with the Forest Service, and things we've communicated to our users in public meetings. Loop opportunities are part of the goal, and social, environmental sustainability, getting what people want out of a trail is also part of the goal. But creating those experiences that, involve loops and connected rides are really important. So, having this zone in Mortimer that has a number of kind of options is really big. I'll never forget when I went to Harrisonburg, Virginia for the first time. I know some people that are listening probably have done that, but I remember being in, the campground there at the bottom of Lookout Mountain in that area in Harrisonburg, Virginia.
Yeah, it's just like loops and loops.
Yeah,
and
and
loops.
I remember seeing lots of other people doing the same thing I was in the morning, and getting up, camping, and getting your bike ready. Lots of people biking there, and I didn't see hardly any of those people the rest of the day because they were all kind of going different directions. It's like what happens at the pin bar race, where you start at Black Mountain Campground and everybody just kind of all in one place to begin with, but then they're dispersed across the forest, and you may see somebody if they take the same route as you or crisscross. But it's kind of like that. I remember being really impressed with the amount of riding there and the quality of riding there. And also I figured out from that project that there's a guy named Rich Edwards who worked for IMBA up and lived up there, who did a lot of work. And there's some people I met back way back when I was looking at this that they figured out a way how to work with the local agency and fix what sucks, and also advocate for those experiences that people really went to the National Forest to ride. So you're not talking about building a bike park there. You're talking about eliminating a ditched out section of trail that goes over a knob and maybe creating a half mile of scree field type rock tech in its place.
Yeah.
That I think is a nice alternative to an unsustainable section that, might be able to be a little better managed down the road.
What I love about looking at new maps like this is previously when you're planning Wilson Creek rides, it's probably going to involve a lot of gravel road. Like if no one's ridden gravel in Wilson Creek, like that's real gravel road riding. Like if someone says gravel, that's where my mind goes. It's like pelling up Globe Road or doing Edgemont or something like. But to create an opportunity to get people off roads and more into the woods, and riding good backcountry trails, like all for it.
Yeah, still could be a death march, but
yeah.
But yeah, especially in July in Wilson Creek in the heat. But but yeah, it's nice to have a trail that climbs. But I mean, I know some people still like descending Thrift Cove. It's like, hey, we can go up or down this trail and it still works, and still might be a good option to come down.
Drift Cove.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's awesome to see Wilson Creek getting a lot of attention in the grandfather district, because prior, the Old Fort stuff has been getting a ton of attention. Of course, they're also planning like 40 plus miles of trail, and they're right there at the forefront of the attention and the accessibility. But don't let people sleep on Wilson Creek.
Yeah, and I think I remember listening to the Old Fort episode, and Lisa Jennings, who's I want to give her a big shout out, because she's huge for mountain biking, and really just huge for all users of the forest, because she's a strong advocate for partnerships and developing trust with people that really care about the forest, that could be an asset for them and make some of their life easier, but also having relationships that can help give us what we need too, which is great places to ride and recreate. But I remember hearing her talking in that one about kind of some of the differences with Old Fort and Mortimer, or if she didn't. I mean, Old Fort has got a lot of economic development. They've got a lot of different land, and the access is a lot different. They've got a lot of energy, and Jason McDougald and the Camp Greer and the G5. It's absolutely awesome. I think with the Mortimer project, it's a lot different, and that it's a little bit more of a rural area. Access is a little bit different, and it's kind of hard for us to start working with the tourism bureaus on driving traffic and to a place like that, where it's we have to be sensitive to what what we can do and what we can how much we can promote the place. I mean, here I am on a podcast, but a lot of years out there, and a lot of people are going to be coming to ride this. But I think the focus for us has really been trying to keep that infrastructure balance, and think about things such as dispersing traffic, and really trying to prepare trails that are already degrading for a little bit more use. I'm really, really proud of what's happening in Pisgah. I mean, really all across. I mean, I have talks a lot with Craig Rulin, Pisgah Area SORBA president, and I know the president of our chapter, Travis Hutchins, and others are talking a lot about how we can kind of learn from each other. And, it is one forest, and there are a lot of commonalities in what we want to do. And I said earlier that I copied some of the things they did with agreements that were signed with our local district ranger. And, I'm getting ready to do a talk with some people in a few days about federal funding and how to get, this is an IMBA program that they're going to have online, just that kind of talks about different models and different mechanisms for funding. So a lot of these things that we're doing, we've copied and stolen from other people. And hopefully I would encourage anybody who's involved with trail advocacy to really look at the type of land you're working with and find other precedent examples that can happen. And it really works, especially when you got good trust and good partners.
Yeah, not just partners with land managers and stuff, but different groups, like multi-use groups. Like you mentioned, getting that RTP grant for Marks Mountain Trail, because working with the Mountains to Sea Trail, getting it off that road and onto a new trail, or also creating these additional new trails and different access points, so you're not funneling traffic all to one spot.
Yeah, and the partnerships are huge. I mean, and through the National Forest planning and through other relationships that have been built with other organizations. I mean, I remember seeing something that was eye-opening to me, and I guess I'll get to the, I think if you to separate mountain bikers from conservationists, for example, some people might say that those are two different things, and I completely disagree with that. I mean,
100%, yeah.
Mountain bikers should not be looked at separately than conservation community in some regards, because we all kind of want the same things. I mean, I remember seeing a pretty well-developed survey that IMBA put out a few years ago, and I remember it was staggering that, a good sample size too, like 80% or more, the number one reason for people to ride in a forest setting was to be connected with nature. So that was eye-opening to me. It wasn't, tech. It wasn't, huge, long miles. It was the number one reason for 81% or 80-something% of the people was to connect with nature. So, I think that was eye-opening to me, that there's a lot of overlap with other groups. And, even the Mountains to Sea group, which you mentioned, we worked on Greentown Trail, I don't know, sometime 2015 or so, somewhere around there. And they learned from us that you could have an agreement with the Forest Service and actually hire somebody to do another segment of, to actually hire, under that agreement, you could hire somebody. So one half of Greentown Trail was kind of managed by us, and the other half of Greentown Trail was managed by them. But we both kind of worked together on the trail days and kind of communicating with the district office and talking about different trail builders that could do the job. It was cool, it was cool to leverage resources. I mean, here we benefited from a trail getting money, funding, and other volunteers working on a section that we didn't even really do much for. And the same goes for other places. If you build partners that have common interests,
you get a lot done.
You get a lot done. Yeah, and we talk about this in some of the classes here. About this three-legged stool model of public, private, nonprofits. I mean, if you can involve those entities, the government land agency, nonprofits, and then also, I mean, even you can use the Santa Cruz Bicycles as a private entity that contributed a good amount of money to a trail that we're now getting done faster and better than if we would wait it around. So it's kind of, and then if you involve other nonprofits and other people that can also bring some things to the table, it's just a stronger result. It takes time, I mean, it takes time, and I think that we've learned here, and I think if you talk to people at Pisgah area Sorba and other places that have a clear kind of reputation of getting stuff done, that it takes time, but it's not really anything to be scared about, because there's plenty of work to do in the meantime, and this NEPA process, the district ranger, Nick Larson, we all knew about Schoolhouse, going back to Schoolhouse again. Everybody goes back to Schoolhouse, but he was very adamant that let's not do a NEPA plan and a separate project for Schoolhouse. Let's include it in a big plan to where we can figure out a way to get this NEPA done and get it all done, and we can put that on a shelf. And then as opportunities become available, they could become targets for funding. So I wasn't sure at the time. I wanted to see more progress, and I'm happy that what we have now is, all these trails that you were pulling off of that map, they've all had the NEPA process done. So, it started way back when the scoping project, or the scoping was, and the planning started way before that, but, the botany, archaeology, those kind of things. In Old Fort, they just pay for that and do it all themselves. But, it took us a while to get, Forest Service folks and other people that were hired to do, the NEPA studies on the relocated portions of the trails. But in the meantime, we focused on sections of trail that we could actually deal with. We actually did some machine work on Upper Schoolhouse years before this trail is going to get that done.
Yeah.
There's a few other places where, like Upper Wilson Ridge, 21 Jumps, a few other places where, as this planning was taking place for the big things that everybody's seen here that are going to happen in 2021 and 2022, we're doing some things, and people that might not have noticed, why are you working on Upper Schoolhouse? So, it's like, why are you doing anything with Wilson Ridge? Just because there's going to be
right now.
Because you can right now. And that's pretty much what the district ranger here told me when we were asking questions about it. Like, well, go do it. Who cares if that 3 miles of trail ends up taking you to a ditch? I mean, who cares? Because eventually that 3 miles of maintained trail that you're not going to have to work on very much anymore is going to take you to a really cool, sustainably, realigned trail. So things take time, but there's plenty of stuff to do in the meantime. And I think we've been able to have, I mean, the volunteers that have contributed to this are just, I mean, we've taken so much equipment on our bikes to do corridor work, and we've been out bushwhacking through the woods, coming up with options. And I know other trail people do the same kind of things, but it's an exciting time for this. But there's a lot of things that are really getting a lot of help by volunteers. So
yeah, I think we're coming to the era where like new trails and actual boots on the ground trails being built is kind of going to explode a little bit in a good way.
Yeah, it's exciting for sure. And it takes, I would say, there's one thing, I mean, you don't need to go out and work on trails, but if you're not going to go work on trails, I think please recognize and maybe support the people that do, because, that we hear you don't have to go work on trails to still support trails, but at least
do something.
Try to understand what's going on, learn the language. Give feedback wherever you have that opportunity to. I mean, even this project has had multiple opportunities for public input. We held public meetings, we had chapter meetings, we had things online. And there's always somebody that misses that stuff, but it does guide the process. I mean, the Forest Service term that you'll hear them talk about, Lisa Jennings talks about it all the time, is public participation.
Yeah.
And when it gets to the NEPA stuff where there's official public comment, that is one avenue of giving feedback. The public participation, which you saw with Old Fort and some of the stuff we've done with this Mortimer project, is really good because it guides the project. I mean, it lets people know where the priorities are. So if you really like a place that you're riding, I would say, don't take it for granted necessarily that it's always going to be that way, and give input on why you like to ride that and what you'd like to see in the future whenever you hear of an opportunity for some planning. But yeah, I'm going back to what you said earlier, which is, now is a time where it's really going to explode and it's really exciting. And I think, the more people can get involved with that process, the better the end result's going to be.
Absolutely. So how can people keep up with what you guys are doing up here?
Websites, social media. We have tried to update things on the website, ridenwnc.com. There's some stories up there, that kind of give people updates on the Mortimer Trails project. We also have days of, work days that get posted, and events that we have, meetings that are out there. So we have a mailing list, kind of the traditional avenues of keeping in the loop, I would suggest. But, just kind of keep up with the news. I mean, a lot of effort goes into, putting stuff out there for people to know what's going on. So, I would suggest just taking a look at that and, and then get involved wherever you can. I mean, and that doesn't mean you have to be physically present to be involved. It's always nice if there's people coming to trail days or people joining as members, but, find a way to get involved with the process. And I think you'll be happy with how it works out and how you heard.
Well, awesome, Paul. Thanks a lot, man.
Yeah, my pleasure. It's really nice.
Yeah.
Man, so I gotta say, having more trail-based loop options in the Wilson Creek area out of the Mortimer zone is awesome. There's not... I can't think of a good excuse to not do a loop on trail versus having to throw some road in on the action.
Yeah, I mean, out there, Wilson Creek, you're maybe not at the same elevation you are here. You're a little lower at times, so it's a little warmer, a little muggier. And then when you're just out climbing those gravel roads in the summertime, man, you're just getting baked. So if I can get in the woods, get in the canopy, run along the creek a little bit or something, I'm always going to enjoy that.
Yeah, way better options. Always choose trail over road. Well, speaking of hot and muggy, what do you got in the weather for us in this coming week?
Man, so obviously this past week's been a little rainy, but going into the weekend, we've got some possible rain showers. It's kind of just what we've had the past couple of days or the past couple of weeks. But the week following looks really excellent. It's going to be dry. It's going to be pretty comfortable midweek, and then it's going to warm up towards the end of the week, low 80s, upper 70s, low humidity. So I would say next week's going to be pretty prime time for riding all the trails.
Man, that's very welcome after this past week's rain. I think it's a good time to stop before things get super saturated and muddy.
Yeah, for real. Well, guys, that's a wrap on this week's episode. And as always, you can find us on social media. Just search Pisgah Podcast. And we've got shirts for sale with $5 going to Pisgah area Sorba. Just hit up pisgahpodcast.bigcartel.com.
If you've ever bottomed out your pedals in a good old-fashioned Pisgah ditch, then go ahead and hit subscribe, share with your friends, rate, do whatever. I don't know if it's bad rate material.
I'm still waiting for that 1-star review.
Well, it's the Cat Williams thing. If somebody's not talking shit,